Good evening, and thank you very much. It's always good, it's an honor to actually cross the bridge, the 14th Street Bridge, come across to Virginia tonight and talk to the fine folks of Virginia, get out of D.C. For a while. Governor, thank you so much for the invitation. It's always good to visit your fine state. And like I said, I come to Arlington a lot of times, cross that 14th Street Bridge, some great places to eat out here, actually. So, always great to be out here. Tonight, before we start, I do want to once again touch on the situation in Mali. And again, emphasize that under my administration, the Rogers administration, that my administration will be doing everything in its power to see that the affected areas of Mali are fully restored to the way the people want them. FEMA is on the ground. FEMA assistance is and will be available shortly. I encourage everyone impacted by the disaster to go on the FEMA website and apply for FEMA assistance. Folks, it's an easier process, and you can get help, and we'll start the road back to rebuilding Mali. But I just want everybody to know that the Rogers administration fully supports the people of Hawaii. And again, like I've said many times over the past few days, Andre and I do send our thoughts and prayers out to the many victims of that horrific fire in Mali. Tonight I want to begin my remarks about the agenda that we got laid out here for the coming 4 years. During the last 3 years, our nation has been through many things. And I was thinking about that statement today. We have gone through civil unrest many times. We have gone through a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. We've become more polarized. Instead of talking about our disagreements, we take to the streets in violence and anger at each person. It's time for that anger to come to an end. For us to move forward as a nation, we must first come together as a nation. When we stop the anger, we can reunite and become a nation of one. Tonight, I want to lay out for you my plan to return America to the nation it once was. And I think about this a lot. I'm a child of the 80s, I'll admit it, okay? In the 80s, we had a fantastic president, a president by the name of Ronald Reagan. President Reagan was a unifying figure in our country. He brought this nation together in very trying times. There were significant historical events that happened in his presidency that he brought this nation together. You think about the Columbia accident. You think about the Challenger accident. And then you think about so many of the situations that we went through, so many trying times, soldiers being killed in bombings and that sort of thing. But he brought this nation together in a way I had never seen in my life before. And that's what I want to set out to do for America. In the past 3 years, we've seen progress from a record high of 15.5% unemployment to now we're at 3.3%. There is nobody running for office that will tell you that that's a bad number. The 15% number is, but no one running for public office can tell you that 3.3% unemployment is bad. I want to make it better. And under my administration, we will. We will reform the unemployment system, a system that was taken advantage of during the pandemic. Recently, the Department of Labor announced there are 1.6 jobs available for every American. Think about that. Over 1.5 jobs for every one of us in this room tonight and every American across the country tonight. Under a new system I have proposed called enhanced unemployment, everyone on unemployment will have to have a minimum of 5 interviews a week to qualify for continued benefits. Now you're going to say, that's a pretty strict requirement. Well, let me tell you this. I'm a person who, throughout my life, I've been a victim of downsizing. I've been a victim of layoffs. I've been a victim of furloughs. And the first thing that Andrea has told me in each one of those times, your new job is to find a new job. And that gives you motivation. That gives you motivation to want to go out and find a job, to find, many times, a better job. But we're going to increase the requirements, the work requirements, the job interview requirements, so that we can get you off the federal unemployment rolls and get you into a job that you love. And I know that through the pandemic, and what happened in the pandemic was really no fault of anybody. It had to be done. Unemployment, people had to be put on unemployment to save the economy of this country. Imagine if we didn't do unemployment like the way we did it back in the pandemic. It would have wrecked our entire economy. So we had to do what we had to do. But when the pandemic ended, it was time for us to go back to work. Now, some of us stayed on the unemployment rolls a little bit longer than we should have. And under my administration, that will come to an end. Under my administration, every able-bodied American will have a job. Now, let me make this clear here tonight. When I say every able-bodied American, I'm not talking about our seniors. Our seniors have earned their income, have earned their rest. It's time for them to enjoy it. I'm not talking about the stay-at-home parents. They have a job to do to raise their most prized possessions in our nation's most prized possessions, our youth. Who I'm talking about tonight are the people who took unemployment during the pandemic and never returned to the workforce. This must change. And under my administration, it will. It will. That's a day one priority of my administration, is enhanced unemployment. When it comes to our nation's borders, we must protect our borders. We have to protect our borders. The United States has always been a nation that welcomes people from throughout the world, but we do that through the proper methods. We just don't walk into the United States or walk through border areas. Last February, I made a trip over to El Paso and visited our southernmost border. When I visited the international bridge that connects the United States with Mexico, I saw hundreds of people crossing the bridge and entering the United States the proper way. Not crossing the Rio Grande River, going to people's lands and destroying it and entering the United States the improper way. In order for us to have this come to an end of just going over the Rio Grande River at night and walking on people's lands and coming in our country undetected, undocumented, we have to reestablish our borders. And on day one of my administration, that will happen. There was even talk in the last few days of selling off parts of the border wall that had been paid for. Folks, the border wall was paid for. Contracts have been let. Material has been produced, and oftentimes is laying in our southwest border or on our southwest border in the hot sun. Let's put it to work and let's reestablish our borders. You know, the border is not only is not the only thing we need to be concerned about. On the world stage, we must be a protector of democracy. The United States is one of the leading democracies left in the world. And you think about it, there is only a handful of democracies that are left, or even emerging democracies. And those emerging democracies look upon the United States as that shining beacon on a hill, that shining example of democracy. Even with our problems, and I'm not going to stand here tonight and tell you we don't have our problems. We do. But even with the problems that we have in our country, we're still looked upon as that shining city on a hill. And in order to be that shining city on a hill, we must protect and educate the next generation of Americans. And that starts at our state level. We have seen schools shuttered, now reopened. And we have seen an increase in polarization in our nation. To restore our nation to greatness, we must start in our nation's schools. Since the pandemic, our nation's classrooms have become a political battlefield. It is a battlefield where our students will suffer. Our students should not and will not be the pawn of political games. Our students' jobs, when they go to work, when they go to school every morning, is to learn the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, the good, the bad, and the ugly of American history, not some sanitized version of what somebody thinks they should learn. Under my administration, that will end, and we will return education to the classrooms. We will teach the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, and the good and bad and ugly. By doing this simple thing of simply teaching our history, teaching math, we will educate our next generation so they don't repeat the same mistakes our generation has and past generations have. You know, I've had the good fortune to be married to a full-time educator for over 20 years. And I'm blessed to say that. Andrea is a phenomenal educator. She is a pre-K teacher and recently was promoted to a pre-K instructional coach back in Texas. And she has served in many classrooms as an elementary teacher. Early on in our marriage, I would say it's probably the first couple of years we were married, she wanted to teach summer school after teaching a full school year. She said at the time she did it for the extra pay. Yeah, and many teachers still do that. This last summer, quite a few teachers do still teach summer school for the extra pay. You know, I have to laugh about this one thing. One of the teacher friends I know has this sticker on her laptop. You know how we all put decals on our laptop. She put a decal on the laptop that said, "I got into teaching for the fame and the money." Well, definitely it's not the money. You know, at the end of summer, as the fall term approached and summer school winded down, she was tired, not fully charged, ready to take on another 9 months of school. How do we solve a situation, not only Andrea's, but every teacher in this country? How do we solve that problem? These teachers work, a lot of people who aren't in education don't understand education. I admit, I didn't understand education at first. I did not understand it. Teachers put in close to 60 hours plus a week, if not more. And they are investing their money and their time in your child's education. They deserve a livable wage, and I will get that livable wage passed through Congress, and we will increase teacher pay in our country. You know, too many of our teachers are quite simply living on the poverty level. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. No teacher should ever have to put in 60 hours plus a week and try to scrounge to put dinner on the table for a family. That doesn't make sense. We must bring this to an end, and we will under my presidency. The way we're going to go about doing this is we're going to return the federal budget to the 2019 spending levels, reduce unnecessary federal programs, and use the difference to fund the increases. You know, one of my favorite TV shows is West Wing. How many of you guys remember the TV show West Wing with Martin Sheen as president? There's a famous episode in there that talks about they were trying to pass a education package through Congress. And they're talking about how schools should be palaces. Teachers should make six-figure salaries. The competition for teaching jobs should be top-notch. It should be difficult to become a teacher, not easy. And the competition, you know, like I said, should be great. And the spending for education should be just like the military, just like national defense. Ladies and gentlemen, education is our national defense. We must protect our young Americans in our classroom, and that starts by teaching the right thing. We must restore a true curriculum to the classroom. We must get rid of this so-called woke education. Woke education. Why are we teaching a sanitized version of history to our students? Why are we teaching only the good things, or maybe even certain things that happen in our country? The United States is over 200 years old. We have done some great things, phenomenal things. We landed people on the moon. We done some bad things, slavery. We had a civil war. That needs to be taught in our classrooms so it's not repeated in the future. We must return a sense of patriotism to our classrooms. You know, and I can think of no finer example than a charter school in Texas. Every morning, this charter school in Texas will gather its students. They say the pledges of both the United States of America and the state of Texas. They have a moment of silence, and the principal does a motivating speech. That sets the tone for the day. That should be something that's done in classrooms across this country. You know, when I was in high school, I had a government teacher who was from a different political party. But during my high school years, he never tried to instill his party's agenda on his students. You know, he taught you how government works and instilled a sense of patriotism and pride in you. You know, one of the two things I remember about Mr. Hickey. One, he taught you government. I had him as a senior level. He taught senior level government in high school. Had him, enjoyed that fantastic year. But he also taught you patriotism. And I was part of a spirit club there at my high school called the Red, White, and Blue Club. And part of the initiation to get in this club was to sing on demand by another senior member of that group, Grand O Flag. How many of our school kids across the country tonight can sing Grand O Flag? How many of our school kids across the country tonight have displayed a football-sized American flag on a high school football field on Friday nights? That's patriotism in this country, and that's what we need to return to. My education plan, which is available online, called Back to Basics, talks about this. Talks about how we will pay teachers a living wage that they can live on, and at the same time support their students and families. We owe it to the students in our classrooms to give them the best possible education. We must prepare them for the future. And the only way to do this is to kick politics out of the classroom and return education into the classroom. I want you to think about this tonight. In these classrooms throughout the country, there are boys and girls who are one day going to be the future engineers, future scientists, future governors, future presidents, future astronauts. And in one of these classrooms across America this year, or tonight, or today, is the first person to explore another planet. But the only way we get them to explore those galaxies that are far, far away is to give them the proper education and prepare them for the future. And my plan will do that. You know, as a nation, we must once again learn to respect one another. We have turned against each other, oftentimes in violent ways. Families are torn apart by senseless gun violence. We must pass gun reform that does not infringe on constitutional rights and increase mental health spending to get help to those who need it. You know, the plan I've laid out here tonight is just the beginning of what I believe will restore the United States to the nation it once was. You know, it was just back on this very same week in 1984 that President Reagan accepted the nomination for his party for a second term as president. And I was in attendance that night. And one of the greatest, two fantastic things happened that night. I remember hearing, probably for the first time, Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. And the ending, after President Reagan gave his acceptance speech, was Ray Charles singing America the Beautiful. And that the Dallas Convention Center was in complete tears. Complete tears. That was a sense of patriotism that we had at that time. I want to return that sense of patriotism to our country that we had in the 1980s. And if we come together as one, I know we can do that. May God bless you. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless our troops. And may God bless everyone. Let's go out and let's return the United States to a country that is once again that shining city on the hill. Thank you all very much. Thank you.